Thank you. Thank you very much again. Thank you for that unenthusiastic sitting ovation. That's number 196. It gives me great pleasure, by the way. Thank you, Marcia. I didn't have to call you up. She loves being on television, like we all do and did. As long as we were competent enough to carry it on and be able to come back again. Jerry told me the story about years ago when you were at Channel 3. I had a real nice guy and a very good sportscaster, Jim Leeming. And apparently the sports department had a very poor record in predicting scores of the upcoming games, especially the Eagles score. And they never could seem to get it right. They were always giving the wrong scores. And it got so bad that they decided to bring someone up who didn't give a damn about sports, but would be able to at least give some prognostication. So, Marcia Rose, if you would please come up and give us a rundown on how this happened, what happened, and how successful you were.
Well, I don't know about success. The year was 1971. It was KYW, and George Caldwell and I were anchoring an experiment in the 7 o'clock news. And Jim Leeming, who was the most wonderful and genial of fellows, and also a very good sports director, we used to do a segment on which Jim, on Friday nights, would pick the teams and what their scores would be. And then on Monday, he would Monday morning quarterback on the show and reveal what his prognostications had been. And by and large, they were really pretty good. I mean, he had the numbers and he had the stats and he had all of that stuff. One particular weekend, on Monday, as Jim revealed the numbers, they were deplorable. I mean, they were really terrible. And so George Caldwell just turned and said, for heaven's sakes, Leeming, Marcia Rose could do better than that. I saw the light go on in our news director's office. And his eyes were all ablaze. And when the minute the show was over, he said, okay, guys, from now on, Leeming and Marcia Rose do the picks for Friday, and Monday do the reveal. Now, as Joe very accurately said, not only did I not give a damn about sports, I didn't know a damn about sports. Nothing. I mean, just nothing. And I found it a little bit daunting, but I'll have fun with it. So we made our picks on Friday, and I picked teams because I liked the uniforms. Someone came from St. Louis, where I was born. I knew the owner of the Redskins. You know, it was really very intellectual things like that. And lo and behold, that Monday, I did better than Leeming. I mean, it was absolutely an aberration. And so we did it the next week. And something very similar happened with the same kinds of very logical choices that I made. And this went on week after week. And Jim and I had started out as very good friends. And as the weeks went on, that friendship waned because he would go into a bar and they would say, hey, Leeming, you're letting that broad beat you? And you know, finally this season was over. But Jerry and I were away in Jamaica in January, and I get a call from the station saying, we need your picks for the Super Bowl. I didn't know who was playing. So somebody whispered to me, and I made an inaccurate choice. And that was, by the way, who's playing this year? It was a lovely time, and it was fun. And somewhere I have a picture, which I promised Jerry, of Jim Leeming and I doing it with the list of the things. So that was Jerry, that was in 1971 that we did that. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, Marcia Rose, I'm sure that the gamblers and the bookies were following what the heck you were doing, because they'll go for any edge. I guarantee you they do it in Vegas. And if the color of the uniform had something to do with it. Yeah. Let's hope the green is over purple this weekend. Right. Excuse me. All right. As you can see, we only have 3 chairs up here for the panel. We were supposed to have 6. So 3 guys couldn't make it. That was Lou Tilley, Vince Papale, and Skip Clayton. I know Skippy lived out in the suburbs, said the roads were terrible out there, so that was going on. And I spent a hell of a lot of time writing their biography, so let me tell you, I'm the guy that's ticked off. But anyway, we do want to welcome you to our annual panel, and we will give, in fact, panel, why don't you come on up here, you 3, the big 3 coming up here right now. And I'll introduce you in a second. But this is our annual sports panel. Thank you for coming out in Winter Wonderland. I was driving up through Fairmount Park up there, and believe it or not, there were about a whole bunch of cars up there, and I'm saying, what are they doing up? It's usually deserted up there. They're up there sleigh riding, for God's sake. So if you want to go sleigh riding, maybe you can bum a ride somewhere. Anyway, we will introduce you guys to different topics and give each guy, make an opening comment of about maybe 90 seconds before we shut you down as to what you might want to talk about if it's not on the list that I gave you. And then we'll open it up to questions on certain topics. And at the end of this, we will open it up to questions from the audience. So let's see here. Have we got mics here? Okay. You can share one. Oh, okay.
Joe, I don't need a microphone.
Yeah, Billy says he doesn't need a microphone. That is true. He shouts from the top of the mountain. Well, you're going to get him one anyway.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. Give this up here because I was warned that some of the equipment is not as good as it tends to be. We're going to talk, obviously, about the Philadelphia Eagles. And here's some things on my mind. Who wins this weekend? Vikings, I think we're 3-point favorites. I don't know how much that's changed. Probably it changes every day. But the Eagles seem to like being underdogs anyway. Will Carson Wentz heal for the start or the middle of the season? His injury is very serious, and they're very hard to come back from. Win or lose, how many assistant coaches get head coaching jobs with the Eagles? What is their top draft need? And will Nick Foles be traded? Those are just some of the things on my mind. The Phillies, new manager Gabe Kapler. Will the players buy into his regimented nutrition and clean living philosophy? That'll be interesting to watch. Can Rhys Hoskins keep hitting? I met him at our sports writers' dinner on Monday night. He's a great kid, 24 years old. And I told him, I said, Rhys, and I discovered this very quickly, this kid has a nice, deep, resonant voice. I said, after your career, man, you're perfect for television. His eyes lit up and said, no kidding. So he's got something to look forward to, I think. Will Santana, their big free agent guy, justify his big contract? Should Freddie Galvis been traded? You got a young pitching staff, no veteran starter, maybe Nola. Age discrimination with all the new managers being young. What's going on in baseball? 76ers. I hate the word process. I no longer use that word in any conversation because they keep saying, oh boy, we sat in misery for 4 years by the rinky-dinky, hinky philosophy of putting non-winning players on the floor and charging top prices for people to come see them play. Obviously, the fans that did show up, they came basically to see the stars of the other team because they knew they weren't going to win the game. Why draft players with foot problems? Embiid sat on the bench for 2 years, couldn't play. Simmons couldn't play last year in his first year. He had a leg problem. And not only that, the top pick, Fultz, right now has an ailing shoulder. He hasn't been able to play except for a couple of games. Yeah, they have improved, but how good are they really? They're a 500 ball club right now. I mean, I do like the young talent. Is it going to stay healthy, or is it going to be one of these things where they've got to watch Embiid every single day, it seems? And the last question is, who the hell's coaching this team? Is Andy Reid coaching this team? Get a big lead early. He lost his playoff game this year with a 21-3 lead. And at the end, he loses every time. I don't know how that happens, because that's what the Sixers have been doing lately. So anyway, maybe Brett Brown, the coach, talks to Andy in the evening or something. I don't know, but something's going on there. As far as the Flyers are concerned, will Hackstall be fired? The team is not too far out of the playoffs. They got a lot of young kids, and they say that they have a great young system of young players coming up, so we'll see. Villanova, they play tonight. They're top ranked. And can they make it through the tournament again this year, win another title? Team, it seems to me, though, they're a little shy on the bench. Finally, Temple, St. Joe's, LaSalle, they're all struggling. Penn has a shot in the Ivy League. So, first of all, time for me to introduce our courageous panel that decided to show up today. In alphabetical order. Gotta get the clamps off here. You know, when you attend sporting events in this area and the public address announcer's voice sounds familiar, you know you're in the right place. He's been the Phillies PA announcer since 1972 and the Eagles stadium announcer for 29 years until 2016. But his performances also led to 5 World Series, 2 baseball all-star games, 3 NFC championship games in the NFL, and he's the longest tenured PA announcer in Major League Baseball. Danny Baker.
Thank you, Joe. And I also want to say that I'm not the only PA announcer who's here today. Kevin Fitzpatrick is the public address voice of the Phillies single-A affiliate, the Lakewood Blue Claws.
All right.
A lot of good players coming through Lakewood.
Stand up. There he is.
Kevin Fitzpatrick.
Good to see you.
And congratulations to WRTI. I have a graduate degree from Temple, many friends from Temple University, and I've known Tobias Poole for many years. He's a wonderful representative of Temple University and this business. So, Mr. Johnson and Tobias, congratulations, and a well-deserved honor for WRTI.
Hey, Dan, excuse me. I forgot to also say here, because since I wrote it and took a long time to put all this together. Additionally, he has been the voice of Drexel basketball play-by-play, PA announcer as well, executive director and announcer of the Big Five, and a member of both the Big Five and the Philadelphia Sports Halls of Fame. And that's just a pretty good record and only a little bit of what you've actually accomplished.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. It's certainly been a labor of love for all of these years. And I want to answer one question that you had on there. Who is going to win Sunday's NFC Championship game? Bill Wright Sr. is wearing the cap of the team that's going to win on Sunday.
All right, Big Bill.
So that was quite a game they played last week. And I wanted to say, Joe, I don't know if you're aware, or a lot of our friends here, but even though the Eagles replaced me on the PA mic 4 years ago, I was hired by Xfinity Live, the big sports bar that is on the site of the former Spectrum at Broad and Pattison. And so I'm working more Eagles games now than when I was an Eagles employee. They have a great big 32-foot LED screen inside of Xfinity Live. It's the largest on the East Coast. outside of a stadium or an arena.
Oh,
And
Danny,
they're-
you have to stay away from the bar. We don't want you slurring your words later
no,
on.
I do. I stay away from it. I can slur my words without even having a drink. But no, it's a lot of fun. They're packed. Maybe you've seen some of the video on TV, but it's wall to wall. For this Sunday, there will be over 10,000 people. This is just inside the sports bar. Because there's this phenomena where, of course, as you know, the Eagles sell out for every game. They have a waiting list of 50,000 for season tickets. But a lot of people who don't have tickets for the game like to come down to the site, tailgate, and get that feeling, the ambiance of being at an Eagles game. So the ticketed people will go into the stadium, and there are thousands without tickets. They stay outside, but now they have a place to come inside. Xfinity Live. And we have the Xfinity Live cheerleaders, and we do Eagles trivia. It's really a great place, and it's an exciting place to watch an Eagles football game.
Okay, Danny, we'll be back to you with a lot of Philly questions since you're hanging around that place. Next, another Temple grad. By the way, with WRTI, did we mention Merrill Reese was also there? I didn't hear that, but anyway, he was just another of the many, many great graduates at the Temple Communications Department. Another Temple grad, he quickly broke into radio in the early 80s, but his first sportscasting job was at WHYY. He also did weekends at Channel 10. While at HYY, he met the lovely reporter Sue Serio. They later married, and Sue won a TV job in Buffalo, and he followed, also landing the sports job there at the same time, at the same station. But Philly called, and he returned to the Philly area to do sports weekends at Channel 29. She followed him to win the weather job at Channel 29, where she has excelled for nearly a couple of decades. Now, he has won several Emmys. He left Channel 29 in 2009, forming his own production company and doing industrial films and local projects. Very versatile guy. Bill Vargas.
Oh, thank you very much. What? Oh, thank you, Mike. Really, all I had to say, Joe, is he's married to Sue Serio. That's it. That's how everybody knows me nowadays, anyway. You know what I mean?
Well, tell me, Mr. Serio.
Thanks for having me, Jerry, once again. Joe, I love you. You know, you're like this, the guy who does all of your research, and you gave us all these different topics that you touched on that we could talk about today. And for me, like right now, I'm just all about the Eagles. Like, I don't even know what's going on with the Flyers, man, or...
Neither
really.
do I, as a matter of fact.
So, I mean, when we're coming up on the NFC Championship game, that's what I'm locked in on. And, you got two teams that are really, really pretty equal on a lot of levels. So I'm just going to have Marsha Rose come up and make my prediction for me. And by the way, I did start out at WRTI also. As you mentioned, I'm a Temple grad, and that was back in the days when college students actually were allowed to go on the air and do the play-by-play on the games, and I was able to do all that. Now, of course, it's all professionals because Temple's become so big, but WRTI was a big part of my career.
Okay, great. Yeah, I really can't wait for Marsha Rose's prediction. I think it may have some significance. Okay, as a sportscaster at Channel 6 back in the 70s, an annoying sound tech constantly came into my office,
Still annoying.
spouting sports stats. This motor mouth could talk the arms off a bronze statue. It finally occurred to me, though, that he could be the first sports producer in the city. He could dig up all these types of stories with his local contacts and knowledge, and management bought it. Thus, I created my own robot, my own Frankenstein. Thus, he became a 30-year legend and producer at Channel 10 as well. Later, he landed his own sports talk radio show in San Diego for several years, and he's still talking at WCHE in Chester County. He's also been a broadcast NFL and college game spotter for numerous big-name national sportscasters, including Merrill Reese. Here he is, never at a loss for words, Bill Motormouth Werndow.
I can't believe you already cheap-shotting me, Joe. I can't believe that. I was so gracious to come today in this terrible weather. When you mentioned San Diego, I never saw snow in San Diego. Never. The closest I got was when I went to the mountains and I saw the snow. But this is horrific when I see this stuff. But no, I agree with Bill Vargas. This week is all dedicated to the Philadelphia Eagles. And, you know, I look at the Eagles football team, and everybody is applauding Howie Roseman. Yes, Howie's done a good job. But he also has three guys that are so important to that organization. One, the former general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Tom Donahoe. The other, Joe Douglas, who worked at the feet of Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore, and Andy Weidel, who also worked there. These guys are the ones who orchestrated many of these personnel moves and maybe all of these personnel moves. So, I mean, when you give a lot of attention to Howie Roseman, yes, he deserves it. He's the head of the ship. But I believe that the people that work under Howie Roseman deserve the credit. And we're talking about the Eagles on Sunday. They will prevail against the Minnesota Vikings. I am very confident. I think the Eagles team is a better team top to bottom. I think because Doug Peterson is not an Andy Reid clone. And when I talk about Andy Reid, a lot of people get upset in this town. I don't think Andy Reid is the fourth best coach in Philadelphia history. The number one was Gracie Neal, who led them to two world championships. Number two was Buck Shaw, and a close third was Dick Vermeil, and a distant fourth is Andy Reid. So, Joe, let's go.
Can I disagree with him?
Go ahead, you can disagree.
Go right ahead.
I look at the Minnesota Vikings team. I think they are actually a better team on paper than the Eagles. And I
You don't win on paper. Remember
Right.
when the Eagles played the vaunted Dallas Cowboys in 1981?
Yeah.
Frigid Cowboy, a frigid day in Philadelphia at the Vet. The Eagles were a 1-point underdog, and they prevailed. So, go ahead.
I'm not saying the Eagles can't win. I'm saying that Doug Peterson is going to have to do an excellent job of coaching this team. I think your statement was that they're a better team than the Vikings, which I disagree with. Vikings have a little better receivers. Vikings are a little better at quarterback. Both teams have great defenses. Probably offensive line is tough to call, but I would say on paper the Vikings are a little better. And if Doug Peterson can find a way to, Vikings have a great coach in Mike Zimmer. They've got a guy at quarterback who's a backup quarterback also, really technically a third stringer. They've got backup running backs playing because their young rookie got hurt early in the season.
Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and I think that all in all, you know, Mike Zimmer, everybody acknowledges what a great coach he is. So, you know, a lot of us early on didn't think much of Doug Peterson. He's really proven himself. He did a great job last week of putting Nick Foles in a position where, you know, we saw Nick Foles really struggle, and then all of a sudden he comes out last week and he puts him in these run-pass options and gets him into a rhythm, and Nick Foles started hitting everything. And I think that was a great move by Doug Peterson. Just he saw what was working and he incorporated that. So I think he's going to have to really, really come up with some things to win this game on Sunday. He's going to have to really do a great job of coaching, and he's going to have to put everybody in a position to win the way he did last week.
I like the Eagles because of the defense. And, Bill, you make some valid points. I think it's going to be another close game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. And two really good defenses. I think home field advantage is going to come into play. It's going to be loud at Lincoln Financial Field. And for a young quarterback, and I know Keenum's had, you know, just a terrific year. And they've won some games, you know, that I didn't think they could win this year, Minnesota. But, and I think this is going to be a close game. I don't think the margin of victory is going to be a narrow one, I believe. But I think you're going to see a game very much, Joe, like last Saturday, when the Eagles beat the Atlanta Falcons 15-10. I think this is going to be another maybe a 13-10, or, you know, 17-12, 17-13. I think it's going to be something like that. And And I could see the Eagles' loud home crowd disrupting things a little bit for the Minnesota offense.
Yeah, I like the home field advantage. You know, the playoffs this year have been bizarre. I mean, if you see all those weird plays that have occurred, like when they played Atlanta, they throw a pass, and the defensive back jumps up, the ball hits him in the knee, and it bounces to an Eagles wide receiver, and he picks up about 15 yards. I mean, I've never seen a defensive back, knee the ball 15 yards the other direction. So, and then you've got, you know, all sorts of different things happening. You've got instant replay whereby, well, did he really hold the ball as he was falling out of bounds and have control of it before he hit the ground? And they're looking at it under microscopes and so forth. So I just think there are going to be little plays like that that could well decide this thing, because you've only got 4 teams left. The final 2 go to the Super Bowl. And when you get to this point, you're going to have great defenses and pretty good offenses to go against each other. And then it's just going to be maybe a block or two. Like the last play of the game where Minnesota wins the game, but they shouldn't have won. Saints had it wrapped up with 10 seconds left. Keenum throws a long, wobbly pass, and a rookie defensive back says, well, I can't hit this guy. It may be a penalty. Well, not by staying away from the receiver catches the ball, almost falls down. The defensive back never touches him, and he runs for the winning touchdown with time expiring. I mean, Minnesota will go down in history as that greatest play in their history, probably, that they've ever seen. I mean, the town went bonkers. So anyway,
Joe, I want to
it looks be
interject
that
one
way.
thing you mentioned about replay. Replay should take no more than 70 seconds. Not 3 minutes, not 5 minutes, and this is across the board with all sports. Baseball, football, hockey, basketball. No more than 70 seconds on replay. And the guy in the commissioner's office, the guy that they call the commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell, it's an embarrassment to the nation when he gets $49 million and people are paying $200 and $300 a ticket to go to a game, and people are paying astronomical amounts of money for cable TV. This guy is an absolute joke, and I'd fire him immediately if I was an owner.
I agree with you. However, Billy, I editorialized when I was on television for 15 years before they encompassed replay. I know it cost a lot of money to set up all that. The league didn't want to spend the money, but it makes the game correct. I don't care how long.
I wanted the
Hey,
human
wait a
element
minute.
back, Joe.
How
I
long?
want the human element
Wait
back.
a minute.
Come on.
The human 70 seconds? Where have you got to go? What is 70 seconds doing interrupting your plans for the rest of the evening? Are you
70
waiting for a
seconds
restaurant?
maximum, Joe.
He must have
Simple as that.
He must have a hot date waiting for him somewhere.
That's a
Anyway,
long time ago, Joe.
we're all like that.
Well,
Say,
part
by
of
the
the
way,
problem,
wait a minute.
Joe, is that nobody knows what the hell a catch is.
You're right, Bill.
Anymore.
Well,
what
that's the rules.
constitutes a
That's
catch?
the NFL's rules problem. They better straighten it out in
But
the
they got to
off-season
look at the
game.
replay and figure out, did he have possession of the ball? Was the ball moving as he went to the ground? When he hit the ground, was his hand under the ball? Was
Yeah, did he have control of the ball and so on and so forth. By the way, I like to interject a little bit of sports comedy while we've lost a lot of guys on the panel here today. Years ago, in a San Francisco Giants game, an announcer named Hank Greenwald for the Giants, on a sparse crowd at Candlestick Park, and I worked in San Francisco, and Candlestick Park was the worst baseball stadium I've ever been in, simply because you couldn't play baseball there. The wind was coming off that back bay like it blew a short reliever for the Giants named Stu Miller, who was about 5'7". The wind blew him off the mound.
All-star game.
All-star game. Anyway, Greenwald announced the attendance as 1,632. And he said, 1632? That's not a crowd. That's my shirt size. You can laugh now. Jeez. Boy, this is a tough crowd.
Whoa.
Anyways,
You might get booed on this one, Joe.
Wait,
I
what
got-
year
I
was
got
that,
another
Joe?
one. I got another one that can
What year
top
was that, please?
I got another
What
one.
year was that?
Joe, there's Vince Papale. He's sledding. I think down to 16th.
Rocky.
Did we really go back to the 60s for that? Just to get to that
Well,
punchline?
To me, I thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, sports analyst Beano Cook on the Iran hostages welcome back home, given a parade in New York and told that they were going to see a New York Mets game. Beano said, "Haven't they suffered enough?" Okay. And finally, a lot of you older fans.
Joe is appearing tonight at the Sands in
listen.
Bethlehem.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Bill.
They
would you mind-
tore the Sands down, Dan.
Hey, Bill, thanks for laughing. Would you sit in every seat now? Anyway,
I don't even think the Sugar House will
Dick
allow
Stewart,
that.
Dick Stewart, the terrible fielding Pittsburgh
Played in
first
Philadelphia.
baseman who also played in Philadelphia. They called him Dr. Strangeglove. And one night, 30,000 fans, he said, they gave me a standing ovation when I caught a hot dog wrapper on the fly. Yeah. You people are terrible.
You're tough, Joe. You're tough.
Okay.
It's not you, it's
Anyway.
everybody else.
All right. What else you got to say about the Eagles?
Well, Joe, you mentioned in your little synopsis here about what coach they'll lose to another franchise. I think John DeFilippo, their quarterback coach, could be the next coach at Arizona. I don't think Schwartz is going to go or Frank Reich. So I think that is the most logical choice. And you mentioned draft picks. They want an offensive lineman, but this is a terrible year for the draft as far as offensive linemen are concerned. And will Foles be traded? I know they're looking to bring in a young quarterback in the draft this year, late in the draft. So that's my synopsis on that. Danny,
You don't like Nate Sudfeld?
they'll bring in another quarterback, Joe.
Okay. All right.
I would agree with you on DeFilippo probably being the next head coach somewhere coming from the Eagles staff. And I would agree that probably a left tackle would be the best thing for them to get in the draft. You did mention earlier, Billy, about the whole brain trust, not just Howie Roseman, but everybody being involved. And it's really hard to know who's the one calling all the shots when they make the trades. Everybody has talked about all the great free agents they brought in this year. The one guy whose name I've not heard anybody mention is their slot corner, Patrick Robinson.
Great pick.
Wasn't that a great? And nobody mentions this guy. He's had a tremendous year.
No question about it.
And in fact, Pro Football Focus rated him as the #2 slot corner in the entire NFL. And nobody mentions him, but I think he's been one of the unsung heroes of this Eagles
He
team.
only signed a one-year deal with the Eagles, so he becomes a free agent after this year. So he'll be a very desirable individual on the free agent market, unless the Eagles can work out a deal. But I think he'll probably play elsewhere next year. It'll be his last opportunity to make the big bucks.
Well, I hope he's back with them
Okay.
again.
Well, I'm really glad you guys straightened that out. All right, Danny, I want to ask you a little bit about the whole change of the Phillies management, the whole philosophy that Gabe Kapler brings in. What are your impressions?
Well, of course, it's turning over a new leaf. There's a lot of good young players. In fact, I'm going into my 47th year as the Phillies PA announcer, Joe, and
You don't look a day over 25.
this is one of the most talented group of youngsters we've ever had. Now, whether they're going to, become stars like that great group of Phillies in the mid-'70s, the Schmidt, Luzinski, Boone, Boa Phillies, or the Phillies of the mid-2000s, Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, Carlos Ruiz, Cole Hamels. It's too early to say that. But there are so many good young prospects that the Phillies now have that certainly some of them are going to emerge as stars. Rhys Hoskins is an example of somebody who's had good minor league statistics, and they translated with the records that he's set with the 18 home runs last year in like 50 games. So I think the Phillies are on the verge. I still think they're going to get another starting pitcher before this coming season. But they have got a lot of good young pitchers. They have got a lot of good young position players. And some of the best pitching prospects, by the way, are still in the minor leagues. They won't be competing for starting jobs this year. Gabe Kapler, the new manager, people ask how I think he's going to do. It's hard to say. He's had some success as director of player development with the Los Angeles Dodgers. He, of course, played in the big leagues for 12 years, Gabe Kapler, the Phillies' new manager. And I know, like Roger Hendler, he likes to use that coconut oil. But he's a really health-conscious kind of a guy, and the Phillies believe in eating the right foods, plenty of exercise, plenty of rest. We'll see how that translates, but there are a lot of good young players there, and I definitely think the Phillies are going to supplement this nucleus, if not this year, then following next season. The Phillies are probably going to be big players in free agency.
Yeah, because they got a bundle of money just sitting on the sidelines waiting for those guys to be freed up.
The one thing about the Phillies and many clubs in Major League Baseball right now, I talked to an agent the other day on my radio show in Westchester, John Boggs, who represents a number of players like Ichiro, Adrian Gonzalez, people like that. And I asked him the word collusion. Is that happening right now? Because there's a lot of free agents. If you look at the free agents out on the market right now, you could put an all-star team together. Jake Arrieta, Yu Darvish, the whole deal. And a lot of these clubs are waiting to get a bargain basement prices on an Arrieta or a Darvish. So watch for that. It may cost baseball a few more $1 billion. Remember they had the big collusion case back in the 80s. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. But I'm starting to smell a rat somewhere.
Well, of course, the Phillies did sign the biggest name free agent so far,
Right.
Carlos Santana.
Right.
Yeah.
And he has a very good on-base percentage. He averages 98 walks a year. He's going to hit 20 home runs. He's going to get 80 RBI. And the Phillies are going to score more runs this year.
You know, it's amazing. When you talk to people in baseball, these analytics people, right? One guy said to me, a very prominent person, he said, they are going so far as how long a player stands on his feet in the infield or outfield or on the pitching mound. That's ridiculous.
Yep.
Ridiculous if you're going to break it down that far. Just totally absurd.
Well, I want to kind of challenge something that Dan said. This is a very important point now. I read recently that coconut oil really isn't that good for you.
I don't know. I wasn't making a statement one way or the other, only acknowledging that I know that our new manager and Roger, find that it does have some benefits.
We had the sports writers dinner on Monday night, and Gabe Kapler gave a very interesting and probably the most unusual speech that I've ever heard from a major league manager. He is so into nutrition that he wants the entire Delaware Valley to embrace what they are doing with all this stuff off the field so that they can become part of the Phillies family in a sense. I mean, he like challenged them to really look at what they're doing off the field to make sure that the players are getting the best nutrition, the best sleep, the best whatever the hell is in Gabe Kapler's mind. Kapler, as a matter of fact, when you look at him, this guy's in better shape than any of his players. I mean, he form fits his suit like, were you poured into it, or is that really you? You know, it's one of those things.
Joe, I got to ask you a question. Probably the best conditioned athlete of all times was Babe Ruth, wasn't he?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he had a steady diet of hot dogs. He had the biggest stomach aches you ever saw. One year he ate so many. I think he knocked down 15 hot dogs. It put him in the hospital. That was a year when I think he only played half the season and only hit 25 home runs. But he finally woke up and ended up with 714. So that's not too bad.
You know, I love the hiring of Gabe Kapler also. You know, I kind of have gotten tired of seeing these old white-haired managers, and no offense, because most of us in this room are old guys with white hair, including me if it wasn't for my appointment with Just for Men earlier today. But, but you know, to bring in a young guy who's different and has a different approach, and you got a very young team coming along, and I think that he'll be able to relate to them. It's not that long ago that he played. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And I'm tired of seeing the same old guys. I like that they gave a new guy a shot.
Well, yeah, you bring up a good point. I was going to bring it up as well, is that there is some talk in baseball, and I've heard people talk about it on the Major League Network, that is there now discrimination against older white-haired guys or some that are starting to turn a little gray. I mean, Pete Buchanan, who got fired because they wanted to bring in a younger guy like Kapler, he's not that old. I mean, and the players seem to love him. Now, will the players buy into everything that Kapler is selling? They probably will. But it seems like all the managers are now getting younger and younger because they feel that they are spending their money and keeping it on the sidelines to bring in the younger guys where they can put a complete team together that can win for a long time. You take the former outfielder Springer of the Houston Astros that won the World Series last year. I think he's only, 31, 32, somewhere around there. And, you know, he drew the praises of all of his players. So there may be an issue there that maybe somebody might say, hey, you know, you're keeping us out of all the experience that we have, and that maybe some teams could use that experience for the sake of just hiring younger people. So that's maybe another issue.
Excuse me, Joe, you reference A.J. Hinch, the manager of the Astros.
what I meant. Yeah,
the
that's
great
fine.
job that he did. And I think another reason that the younger people are being embraced by senior management is their willingness to embrace analytics, which a lot of the older managers do not. They're more old school.
Okay.
Not to
Well,
mention
let me-
Bill Werndell.
Well, let me
Let
ask.
me say one thing about that, Mr. Pellegrino and Dan Baker and Bill Vargas and the rest of you guys. I remember I was out in San Diego, and Bruce Bochy was the manager of the San Diego Padres. And a guy named Paul DiPodesta, who is now working for the Cleveland Browns and have made them a train wreck, basically a train wreck. He was working for Sandy Alderson, who is now the president and general manager of the Mets. And one day, Mr. DiPodesta walked down from Alderson's office in San Diego and gave Bruce Bochy the lineup. And I'm sitting there, and Bruce takes the lineup, looks at it, and DiPodesta left. Bruce crumpled it up and threw it in the waste can. And he said, I go on feel. I mean, I use numbers to a certain extent, but I go on feel. DiPodesta has never won a thing in his life. Bruce Bochy's won 1, 2, 3 world championship. The proof is in the pudding right there.
Well, I was going to say that all the teams are using sabermetrics now. How about the teams that end up in last place and are using sabermetrics? So there's no clear evidence that it's going to be everything of the future as far as the game is concerned. Yeah, it helps. Maybe it will increase the win total, but how many wins is it going to increase? Maybe 5, maybe 10. They say managers only maybe make a difference for maybe 15 or 20 games a year with their moves. So, you know, let's face it, they're all trying it and see what happens.
Hey,
But
Joe, one thing I want to interject. Many, many years ago, when Branch Rickey was with the Dodgers, he hired a statistician by the name of Alan Roth to keep statistics. And that was back in the late 40s when he just signed Jackie Robinson. So they've been using analytics way back then.
well, it was a different form of analytics. I think they've
Well, they
got.
didn't have computers.
Yeah, well, you know, I think you go to the blackboard and they've got all these different equations on the board now as opposed to what they were using before with old-time arithmetic. All right, anything else to add on
Just
baseball?
Freddie Galvis. I didn't like that trade at all.
No, I didn't
Sorry.
either.
I did not like the trade of
Freddie
Freddie
Galvis is one of the best shortstops that this town and major leagues have seen in a very long time.
And Freddie was
I think one of the reasons, of course, one of the reasons they moved him is J.P. Crawford's arrival. But another thing is that Freddie had a very low on-base percentage, I think like 309. And it just would not take a walk. and the Phillies coaches have tried to get him to be more selective at the plate, which he would not do. Doesn't mean he wasn't a very good player. I know that there were a number in the organization who were big Freddie Galvis fans. But one of the improvements you're going to see in the Phillies offense this year is their willingness to take a walk. I mentioned Carlos Santana. Rhys Hoskins will take a walk. Cesar Hernandez, the second baseman, who's likely to be replaced by Scott Kingery 2 or 3 months in. But these guys all will take walks. In the last couple of years, one of the reasons for the Phillies' poor offense was that we did have a lot of wild swingers who wouldn't take many pitches. And, of course, by taking a lot of pitches, maybe that starting pitcher for the other team isn't going to last as many innings either. So that's one of the ways you're going to see. And, of course, that's an old time statistic.
Right. But how many runs did Freddie Galvis save defensively with his glove? That's the key.
Well, I'm sure he saved a few, but I think J.P. Crawford will save a bunch, too.
Well,
J.P. Crawford has the most pressure of anybody to come into Philadelphia in a while.
yeah, and what if Crawford gets hurt?
Well,
Well,
Not
maybe
if he gets
Kingery
hurt. He
goes
better
up.
perform at about 260, 270 and get on base on a regular basis and commit very few errors in the field. A lot of pressure on him, Danny. Lot.
There is, and I think you're going to like him. I think
Yeah.
J.P. Crawford, you saw him last
He's
September.
got a lot of talent.
Well, here's the other thing about Freddie Galvis, too, is that, and unlike you guys, I believe very strongly in statistics and analytics, and I hate guys with low on-base percentage. I think taking a walk is a huge part of baseball. But having said all that, Freddie Galvis was a leader on this team. He was a leader in the clubhouse. Yep. They had a great attitude for a young team. They really were resilient. They really had a very positive attitude, and I think Freddie Galvis was the #1 guy in developing that kind of. Okay, thank you.
All right, let me bring up one thing that I've talked to Billy about over the last couple of years. I think there should be a major change in a rule in baseball. The bunt is a sacrifice. That's right. The batter gives up his time at bat to move a runner or runners up a base by bunting a ball 15 or 20 feet. But what about the guy who has the talent and the strength to hit a long drive up against the fence that an outfielder makes a catch on, and he's so far from the ball, from the diamond, that men on first and second can actually move up to second and third? That, to me, should also be a sacrifice fly. That's just for one second. You can move up 3 runners. But that, to me, is still a sacrifice fly for the guy that hits the ball and allows runners to move up. And they'll say, well, he didn't really sacrifice his at bat. Yeah, but without the strength and his ability to hit a ball that far and not get any credit for it, to me, the guy is being cheated. Now, I know the owners don't want it because that means he doesn't get a time at bat. That means that his average will stay the same or go up eventually, as opposed to a normal sacrifice and so forth. So, to me, I think it behooves the baseball union, I think, to get involved and say, hey, these guys should get some credit for moving up 1 or 2 runners without a time at bat.
I think that's a good point, Joe. It really is. And I think what we should do is have Joe be the guy who's going to go back through all the films and all the game box scores from
got plenty of time.
1869 to the present and figure out and change everybody's statistics.
Even if it's 10 at bats, it may be 10 numbers in the batting average. I mean.
But here's the other thing, Joe. The other thing that's missing from the game of baseball today is the stolen base. We don't see the stolen base anymore. It's almost like it's a lost art in the game of baseball.
Yeah, days of Richie Ashburn and all those guys. Well, there are a couple of guys that score a lot. I mean, but Hamilton of Cincinnati Reds.
He could be with the San Francisco Giants in the next couple of days.
Okay, listen, let's move on to the 76ers. Like I said, I hate the word process. To me, I would never draft a basketball player with foot problems. Now, of course, it depends with plenty of medical.
You would not have drafted Joel Embiid.
No, what I'm saying is it depends on what kind of foot problem it was.
Oh.
You see, I talked to doctors about Embiid, and where he had the broken foot was on the outside. And my doctor said to me, this kid is, you know, he's 7'3" or whatever it is. He's 280 pounds or whatever it is. He says those little bones down there on that area of the foot are very hard to heal. That's why he couldn't play for 2 years. So maybe he will be able to have a good career, and I hope to heaven that he's able to stay healthy for the rest of his career. But, I mean, they're still watching him very closely. They don't want him to play back-to-back games. So are you getting everything out of Embiid that you want to out of a first-round draft choice? Eventually, maybe you will. And with Simmons, he also was out for a full year. You know, these are great players, and they look like if they last long, happy to have them. I mean, they may lead them to a championship. I'm just saying, why take on that responsibility no matter how good the guy is? I mean, you know, you can talk about, what the hell was his name? Sam that was taken.
Sam Bowie.
Sam Bowie before
Bill
Michael,
Walton had foot problems, too.
Yeah, Bill Walton. Before Michael Jordan was drafted, Bowie was drafted before Jordan. And he never hardly played at all. I mean, his legs couldn't handle it because of broken fibula and tibia and so forth. I mean, it just was tragic for this guy. So anyway, that's one thought. So where are the Sixers? How far do you think they can go? And you've also got their other draft pick right now of this year, Markelle Fultz, got a bad shoulder. He's still trying to come back. So they've had a problem. Now they've just lost J.J. Redick for a couple of weeks. He hurt his leg yesterday or the day before. So injuries play a big part in where a team is going to go. Your thoughts, guys. Billy, go start.
Well, I certainly think the Fultz deal, I'm still scratching my head because they traded up 2 spots and they gave up a lottery pick that's owned by the Lakers. I mean, I didn't think Fultz was a difference maker coming into this year's NBA season. And they had a number of players they could have drafted. This wasn't a class that was loaded with 1 or 2 great talents. I think it was a mistake to give up that lottery pick and give it to Boston so Boston can get better. I just did not like the deal for Fultz, and I would have taken the Fox kid. I'd have taken possibly Tatum. Those guys would have been on the board at number 3, and I think they made a mistake with Fultz. I think it's going to come back to haunt them.
I don't. I think Fultz is a difference maker. I loved what they did to get him, but, you know, with the shoulder injury, we just don't know. And the things are getting crazy. It's hard to figure out what's going on with the Sixers because there's always some kind of injury, some kind of setback. Ben Simmons missed a year.
It's
you
the
know,
Hinkie
Embiid-
curse.
It's also blowing big leads, too. I mean, a 22-point lead the other day against Toronto, they almost coughed that up. I think 4 times this year they've had 20-point leads or better, and they coughed up a game. I mean, you can't have that.
Yeah.
And you look at the stat sheet, and you see the turnovers. They have way too many turnovers for a team that's supposed to be on the come.
But what they have is they're an interesting team, and they have potentially an exciting team. And that's something that we need in this city because with Embiid and Simmons, those guys are exceptional players. And I happened to be watching an NBA game the other night, Oklahoma City against Minnesota. And it was just everybody just spotted up and shot 3-pointers all day. And I hate to sound like an old guy, but today's NBA is just boring. They just shoot the
You're
ball
right.
from
100%.
25 feet every play. Thank you for agreeing. But at least with the Sixers, when Embiid decides he's going to go inside and play and not just stand outside and shoot threes, they have an inside game. Ben Simmons doesn't even take an outside shot. His whole game is attacking the basket. So there's a little bit more of an old school feel with this Sixers team, and I think they have some outstanding talent that could, if all these injuries ever settle that down, become a very good team.
Joe, I just wanted to say I would have taken a chance on Joel Embiid because I think he could be a very special talent if he's healthy. There's not many players that come along that have the potential for greatness that he does. So, yeah, it's a roll of the dice, but, you got to take that once in a while. And there was really nobody else that they could have selected that could have had his upside if healthy. And when he is healthy, and if we can get him playing back-to-back,
Exactly.
he's going to put up terrific numbers.
He's an exceptional talent.
The
There's no
other
question
thing,
about
Joe, I'm tired of hearing people say he's the next Chamberlain. There's never going to be another Chamberlain. Chamberlain was the most dominant player ever to play the game.
He only
I don't want to
averaged.
hear about Michael Jordan, anybody. Wilt Chamberlain, by far, was the greatest basketball player of all time and maybe one of the top 3 greatest athletes of all time. He could do it all, and he played 48 minutes a game.
And he never fouled out.
Never fouled out.
And not only that, he averaged 50 points a game in one season. And then they said to him, well, Wilt, you're shooting too much. So he got so angry, he refused to shoot the next season or the season after that or whatever. And the coaches said, look, we didn't mean it that way, Wilt. You know, you got to shoot. We need you out there. But he would just pass the ball and let the other guys score.
Well,
and
at the
of course,
risk of getting
booed,
booed.
the record didn't. It wasn't very good once that started.
At the risk of getting booed, I might point out that Bill Russell had 11 world championships.
But who was the
Yeah.
greatest basketball team ever assembled, voted by everybody who saw NBA basketball for 50 years?
The 1967
67
Sixers.
team, which could beat Russell's team every night out if they'd have stayed together. If Wilt wasn't have gone to Los Angeles, that team would have put up unbelievable numbers. When Wilt came out of Kansas and started with the Sixers, they had Paul Harrison and Tom Gola, good players, very Hall of Fame type players. But Bill Russell, look what Red Auerbach did with the Boston Celtics. He had Cousy and Sharman, had Heinz and Leskatoff and Russell.
Then
and coming
Sam
off the
Jones,
bench,
Casey
Clyde
Jones.
Lovellette, Casey Jones, Sam Jones. You know what Sam Jones told me, who played on 11 World Championship teams with Bill Russell at Pagano's in West Philadelphia? He turned and said to me, I said, who was the best player of all times? And he played with Bill Russell. He said, are you kidding me? The guy you guys have in Philadelphia. Wilt Chamberlain, by far.
Well, there's no question he was a far better athlete than Bill Russell, but Bill Russell had the intangible that even after all of those guys you mentioned retired, and the team was just Russell and Sam Jones
John Havlicek.
in his final year and Havlicek, they still won a championship over Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, and Jerry West out with the LA Lakers. And also, think of this, Bill Russell in college won with the San Francisco University, which never before or since has ever done anything. He won 2 NCAA championships.
Casey Jones was on that team as well.
Okay. They didn't even have a gym. They didn't even have a basketball arena
Bill,
to
go
play
ahead.
in.
All right, wait a minute, just a minute.
Bill's got a question.
All right, I saw an interview with Bill Russell talking about Chamberlain. I guess it was on ESPN or something. And he started laughing when they talked about, well, how about playing Chamberlain where he kind of dominated you? And he started laughing. He said, oh, he dominated me a lot. He says, and he started breaking out with a big laugh. He said, one night, you know how many rebounds he got on me? 42. 42
He
rebounds.
forgot the one when Wilt set the record for 55 rebounds in a game against Bill Russell. 55 rebounds.
Well, I didn't talk
You're
about
talking
that
about
one.
two guys who
All
both
right.
average 20 to 25 rebounds a game,
Yeah.
which is unheard of today.
Okay,
There's no
let's
question
open
Russell
it up. Let's
wasn't
open
the
up
same
some
player as
questions
Chamberlain,
here.
but he was a winner.
Go ahead.
Bill.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I didn't know she had decided on it, but Marsha Rose, what do we got?
What's the score, Marsha Rose?
Okay.
You got to look at her crystal ball, right, Marcia?
Pick a couple of numbers.
I like that, Bill.
This could be a defensive battle with a final score of 3-2.
Please.
That would be a thrilling game, let me tell you.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
He's mentioning collusion, Bill. I think there's a distinct possibility. Look, he's not the greatest quarterback. He's not the greatest teammate. I've talked to people in San Francisco. But the guy deserved a shot of playing in this league. I mean, again, you have to bring him in. I'd have brought him in for a look-see if I ran an organization to see where his head is, the whole deal. But I think there's a distinct possibility that he could win that lawsuit.
I hope not, and I'll tell you why. I'm an Army veteran. I stood guard with an M1 and a carbine for 2 years. Maybe I stood guard to protect his parents or his grandparents. And as far as I'm concerned, when you disgrace the American flag and the national anthem, to me, you're not a real American. He's got a million ways he can protest. Go buy a bullhorn, go out and stand on every street corner in the country and yell your lungs out for all you're worth, as far as I'm concerned. But don't insult every guy that's worn an American Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force uniform, Marines. I'll tell you, man, I talked to plenty of veterans. They are so ticked off with that guy that they don't ever want to see his face again.
Joe, you know what's interesting? I do a lot of college football on the weekend for a year. I do a lot of college football on the weekends. Do you know that the colleges do not come out for the national anthem? They stay in the locker room, and then they come out.
They're cowards.
Now, the reason the NFL has the national anthem on TV is because the NFL is getting money from the Defense Department. Simple as that.
The whole
Well,
thing
it's
with
always something.
The thing that Colin Kaepernick was protesting was police brutality and the killing of black men in large numbers, unarmed by police. And somehow it's been misinterpreted and turned into a thing against the Army and the military, which was not at all what was intended. So as far as whether or not he will ever play again, I mean, there has obviously been collusion. The Eagles didn't even go after him when they had Sudfeld as their backup guy. Nobody had ever seen the kid play. There's other teams, Baltimore Ravens certainly could have signed him. And I think he's going to win his lawsuit.
Well,
I really
Bill,
do.
It was so late in the season that for them to bring in Kaepernick with 3 weeks left, he couldn't learn that big playbook. He couldn't learn everything he would need to learn. I mean, he would have to be out there freelancing most of the time, even if he was. But not only that, say they brought Kaepernick in, and the Eagles win a Super Bowl with this guy. To me, that would taint the Super Bowl win. I mean, it would be like an asterisk next to the championship as far as I'm concerned with
But
a guy
Joe,
like that.
the Eagles-
Look, I agree with you about what he was protesting. I mean, he wore socks that had policemen drawn on the socks as if they were pigs. I mean, come on. I mean, if you want to protest something, do it in a venue where people will listen and either judge it one way or the other. But just don't do it during the World
But the
Series.
Eagles also have Malcolm Jenkins, who protested as well. And nobody has said a word about that, and nobody's saying that the Eagles Super Bowl will be tainted.
Well, I
because
wasn't
he's a
happy with
damn
him.
good
I know he's a
player.
good
Well, again, what about
And
Chris Long put his hand on his shoulder? And Chris Long gave his game checks the whole season to Charlottesville, Virginia.
Okay.
to
Well,
make
what about
people-
Rodriguez of the Steelers, who went out and left the locker room, the only Steeler that went out on the
Rodriguez,
field
no,
and put his hand over his heart
Alessandro-
because he's an ex-veteran?
The offensive tackle who played here. What was his name? Alejandro Villanueva. Yes. Villanueva. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Question by the young man there.
Good. Tommy John, you know why? Pitchers throw the year round. All these young kids are throwing the baseball the year round. And baseball, you got to shut it down. And many of these kids throw the year round because mommy and daddy think the kid is going to get a scholarship to a college and maybe write their ticket for the rest of their lives and make a lot of money. All right? I think baseball, you got to shut a kid down for 3 or 4 months after the season. And this year-round sports, we don't see 3 sport athletes anymore. We see one sport and one sport only. Simple as that. That's the reason you see so many of these injuries. Danny, you have anything to say about that?
I agree with that. I mean, you see young kids, if they start out in soccer, now they're playing soccer with the traveling teams, and it's all year round. You don't see somebody playing, football, baseball, basketball like we did when we were growing up, and
Yeah.
I think that's a setback in some ways for the kids' development. But
And some of these-
that's the way it is.
And mommy and daddy are the problems. All right, mommy and daddy thinks every kid is going to be the next Cole Hamels. He's going to be the next Ryan Howard. He's going to be the next Carson Wentz. You name it. Mommy and daddy are living in fantasy land. Less than 1% of these kids will even get a shot at a Division I level.
A lot of it is on the parents, but being an athlete who did 3 sports, it comes from the coaches as well.
You're right. And I'll tell you one thing. These administrators in high school should be called on the carpet. You let kids play basketball, football, and baseball, not the year-round weightlifting and all that. Absolutely correct.
I played basketball, ran track, and played football. And the basketball coach, I'm from South Jersey, from Middle Township. The basketball coach wouldn't allow me to play varsity.
That's wrong. He has no right to do that.
Yeah.
He should be fired immediately.
What else have you got to say about that, Bill?
Fired immediately.
No, listen, I remember when I was playing American Legion baseball, when I was, I think, 14 years old.
Against Babe Ruth?
There was, I played in Babe Ruth League also. There was a guy who had his son on the team. He was a shortstop, but he wasn't very good. And we had a good shortstop. And then we had a game coming up, an all-star game. And for some reason, this guy pressured the coach to put him on the team. Well, he was no all-star. Not only that, this guy must have paid this coach off because, and I mean, even then, we knew, wait a minute, that's not right. They started this kid at shortstop. I think he made about 3 errors in 4 innings. And I learned a lot about human nature and what some parents might do to get their kid to get a chance to play. If he doesn't have the talent, you're going to find out about it real quick out on the field, believe me. You will see it. Even at my young age, I knew guys who could play and guys who couldn't play. And but we thought that everybody deserves a chance. But the good shortstop really got shafted because he was cheated out of 3 innings. And even at that young age, we knew what was going on. I mean, that to me is a sad story. Okay. Any more questions? Yes. Yeah. Speak a little louder, will you?
I would have taken Fox or Tatum. Tatum or Fox.
Sounded like Bobby Douglas, the old Chicago Bears quarterback. He had one of the great arms of all time. He threw 90-mile-an-hour football passes, but he threw it to the guy that was 6 feet away from him, and the ball would either hit him in the chest and bounce 10 yards away. I mean, he had the touch on a football of a hand grenade. I mean, it was.
You know what's
was
funny,
that
Joe?
bad.
Joe, just to follow up on that, Bobby Douglas was so crazy and erratic that they had their coach, Abe Gibran, moved in with him and lived with him for a year to try to get Bobby Douglas' head straightened out and still couldn't do it.
And now Abe is throwing footballs up against the wall, right?
You know, I'll tell you one thing. Abe Gibran is one of the great stories. Abe was about 6'2" and about 340 pounds. He once ate at a trading table a half a lamb, an actual half a lamb at a trading table. A half a lamb. Can you picture that?
That's a lot of cholesterol, man.
Absolutely. He didn't take any cholesterol test.
Any more questions? Oh, good. A female.
Yes, ma'am.
People have gotten in trouble for saying their female has a question.
Way to go, Joe.
Well, no, I'm happy you
Way
have
to
a
go,
question.
Joe.
I'm glad you're not bored. I think you're not bored.
We talk about the difference between Wentz and Foles and how they throw and their interceptions and whatnot. What we fail to discuss is the amount of time they stay on the field, giving our defense a much longer rest. Wentz rests our defense. We're coming up against a pretty tough defense this week. I believe Green, I'll be at the game. I've been to every home game all season and for the last umpteen years. But we've got to rest our boys. We've got to keep them off the field.
Remember, last week, Fletcher Cox almost played the entire game. And you're right. You got to give him a lot of breaks. I mean, 14, 15. Absolutely.
Well,
14, 15 play drive.
Well, also
keep
remember-
the defense fresh.
Also, remember Minnesota's coming up against a pretty good defense, also.
Right.
So those guys are animals out there. When a game is this important and on the line, there's a lot of money at stake for all these guys. One other thing I saw on the NFL Network the other day, people are talking about New England. And because of all the so-called disharmony in the front office with the coach, with Tom, with the owner, and so forth and so on, yet they're playing it way down. And the commentator said, who covers New England, he says, forget about all that stuff that they've got a problem. These guys are so fixated on continuing their winning tradition that it's not even a factor in the way they're going to play this weekend against Jacksonville. So if the Eagles meet the Patriots in the Super Bowl, which I hope they do, or Jacksonville, I don't care who's playing, you know, Little Sisters of the Poor maybe. Let's just hope that that the green guys over here are victorious on Sunday, because I think this whole Delaware Valley needs a break, and it's time to have our time.
Absolutely.
All right. Any more questions? Well,
ahead.
one more.
Gabe Kapler hasn't managed at the major league level at all, and I think it's been 10 years since he managed at the minor league level. How do the players feel about playing for someone who has that little experience?
Well, a lot of the players are going to be young players, and I think they're just grateful to be in the big leagues, and who's ever their manager, they're going to respect and play as hard as they can for. And I've been asked by a lot of people already, you know, what I think Gabe Kapler will do as Phillies manager, and I just think we have to give him a chance. Like you say, there's not a track record there that he can point to, but he was highly respected as the director of player development for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And, you know, I think we have to give him a chance and see what happens.
I think Kapler will take the team in a definitive direction, and it's whether or not the players are going to accept it, because they are the ones who have to go out there and perform, and they don't want to have something on their minds that, man, I hate this guy. I mean, I've seen a lot of that happen down through the years with certain players and certain managers and coaches. And but the guy is articulate. He seems to have a reason for what he does and everything that he believes in. And, you know, if he's that good a salesman, he certainly sold management his deal. I'm sure the players will give it a shot, at least 100%, and by midseason we'll know whether or not he's going to be successful or not. What do you guys think?
I think absolutely. You have to give him a chance. And look, the Phillies hired a manager many, many years ago who should never be managing a grocery store. That was Frank Lucchese. I mean, probably the worst manager in Phillies history, in my opinion. Do you agree, Joe?
I liked Frank.
You did.
I'm not
was a
necessarily,
moron.
not necessarily as a manager, but he was a nice guy.
Yeah, well,
That's all
nice
I can say
guys
about
finish last, as Leo DeRocha once said.
Joe, I think we should end with Tobias Poole giving us another Eagles cheer.
Let's go.
An Eagles chant
All right.
to send us into this NFC
right, Tobias.
Championship weekend.
Go ahead.
G-L-E-S, Eagles!
Go Eagles.
All right.
Hey, thanks for showing up, guys. We really appreciate it. It's nice to know we have so many sports fans, and thanks for not throwing anything at me.